with me here. And there we go. So don't worry, here we're on. Everything I've said is true, but now we'll begin. So if you printed this out, here's where we are. We're going to look at your data and be accurate with dates. This is very important, okay? And this has to do with, particularly with special ed, which is a third key item here. I said, make sure you know your students have the proper disabilities. There is different amounts of money that is generated for every student in your district who has an IEP. Observe your timelines. Chris and everybody in our department are really good at sending out things to you that you can know when every timeline is in, when every closure is going to happen to any of your L's, your S's, your end of the year, accounting. You need to know when those are coming up. Work with other districts on shared students. You can do everything if you want to in your district and say, my numbers are never going to change because I know I'm right. However, what another district's reporting about some of your students can have a very, very big effect upon that. Know your testing and your assessment scores. And I believe this one is kind of true. Lisa Britton and I spent a lot of time one time looking at some preschool handicapped students. And, I think you're going to find it, you can spend about 80% of your time with about 20% of your students. And that's going to be fine as we go through here. This is probably true for everybody in your district. My goal today is to see what you know and also help you so that you can answer some questions. Oftentimes you're asked, and I know you are, as to what needs to be done and why changes are happening. But so many districts in Ohio leave money on a table because they're careless. They have errors. They don't, get every student in. They don't get all the disabilities in for special ed kids. They don't get the codes in for students such as, a career tech, or even, college students who are taking high school courses. The SFPR stands for School Finance Payment Report. Every district, traditional, meaning a regular school district, gets it twice a month. Okay, at the end of the year, you get a true up. A true up is actually when everything is balanced, and if they owe you money or you have less money coming, you're going to get that at the end of the year, okay? Or you're going to have your last payment reduced at the end of the year. The district comes from this year's EMIS data, and I'll show you which parts are, and I'll also show you which ones come from past years. In the particular year we're in now, fiscal year 21, we're dealing basically with data either from fiscal year 19 or the present year, and I'll show you which ones are present and which ones are dealing with fiscal year 19. I told you how to find and format this. I've already went over that with you. And these may change in the future because of the Cup-Patterson plan for school financing. However, that has not passed. It's being discussed in the legislature. And if it changes, this will probably change everything we've been talking about. But this today, I can guarantee you that this is what we're on right now. So if you'll look with me, I'm going to do in the next couple pages some things that show you where you can find these things. So where you can find your preschool special ed funding. Now, this is different. Preschool special ed funding is from the state. You're going to see it. Your regular preschool grants that you have for normal students who are not identified, those come from grants, and that does not show up on the SFPR. Special ed transportation, I'll show you that. If you have a handicap bus and you're transporting kids who have physical handicaps or educational handicaps, you can actually get money for special ed transportation. Your open enrollment adjustment. This means you're going to get positive money for your open enrollments who come to you. You're going to get negative amounts for students who are leaving you. Now, you know a lot about the students who come to you, and you know them all by name, And I'm sure when you work with these, you see their names and recognize them. But you don't always recognize the students who are going away from you to other districts. They should register at your district if they're going, but I'm going to tell you that doesn't happen. We're going to show you today about community school transfers, the online schools that actually are educating students in your district, and they're taking money from you. Now, you're going to find that they also get some money, weighted money, for special ed, disadvantagement. And so when you say $6,020 per student, community schools can oftentimes get far more than just that $6,020. L, I mentioned here, and I'll show you that, is called the scholarship transfers. These are the John Peterson students and the autism students. And this goes to usually the non-pubs, your Christian schools, your parochial schools, and you're going to see a great deal of money there that is taken from you when those students go there. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Everybody's in a way of making money today. You know, every district wants as much money as they can have. I know some of your districts have been flooded with money because of the pandemic. But you know, someday that money is going to disappear. And when it disappears, you're going to be going back to living on what you've earned, usually, unless something changes, through the SFPR. And you might say, well, if they're only looking at 2019 data, why should I be worried about now? Well, next year they might be looking at 2020 data. The next year they may be looking at 2021 as their baseline. So what you're putting in 2021, I guarantee you will be used sometime in the future. So getting it right is very important. I'll show you here where the special education component is on line A. And if you'll go to the next page with me. Okay, and I hope you can see this. And I'm going to go right down through with you. This is for district. I blackened out the names as best I could, so you don't see exactly what district, but it doesn't matter. You could call this district up and find the same report for a district that I did and took from here. Now you can see further down on that page, all the letters A through R. And this is what I talked about on the page before. And I'll go through this with you. If you look up there, you're going to find your foundation formula funding in this district's about $6,270,000. And if you look down a little further, okay, at the letters that I've told you about, D there is going to be the amount of money for your preschool special ed students. This is a positive, you're getting it. It's based on your handicapped students who are identified in preschool. That does not mean your typicals. That means kids who have an IEP as early as preschool. The next letter, E, $7,000 some in this district, is for special transportation for students. Could be one student, two students, and there's a formula to figure that up, and we'll show you that later on as we go through. Okay, then you can see kind of a double line there, okay, after the letter G, and that is what you call money that is above the line. Now that money above the line is basically from fiscal year 19. Now, beginning with the letter H, you're going to see that is money halfway on that page that is now current for the year, fiscal year 2021. And I'll stop after this page if anyone has any questions. H is the money that goes and transfers to your ESC. Many of you buy services from your ESC, maybe psychological services, maybe a speech therapist, maybe a curriculum coordinator, maybe even teachers, okay, you buy from them. Then the next one there is I. This is your open enrollment that are coming to your district. That is a positive number. That means that they're going to take care of how many kids are coming compared to how many are going, and that can be a positive number, but it can also be a negative number. I've seen districts losing $3 million to open enrollment. Now think what that district could do if they had $3 million more that they could spend. Sure, they'd have a lot more students to deal with, but they would also have a lot more money to deal with too. The community school transfer there is $174,000 for this district. Those would be the kids that are online at a chartered community school. So you can see a negative number here, and it's never going to be a positive number. It's either going to be 0 or it's going to be a negative number, because these are students are going to the different online schools. Have the online schools grown during this pandemic? Yes. There are more kids at online schools. A lot of them signed up early and came back, but a lot of them have stayed there this year because of the pandemic. And therefore, that is money that's being taken away for those students. Okay, then you're going to go down here a little further, and you can see down below, you get some money down here for career tech, CTA, E students. You can see another one you get for economic disadvantage. And I know a lot of you are worried about, are you a school that every student can eat free in? Next year, every student in the state of Ohio will be given a free lunch. Nobody will pay for a lunch. That does not mean you can quit entering economic disadvantagement, because you're going to have to. This is based on the funding from 2000, and you can see 19, fiscal year 19. And again, next year, maybe it'll be based on fiscal year 20, and maybe next year, 21. We're just not sure yet. Then you can see how the total money of special ed, okay, an adjustment here from line A up there, from that 6 million takes place. Now I'll stop now. And, I think Amy is going to monitor chat. And if you have a question, ask it now so far. This is the front page. This is what most treasurers print out. This is what most superintendents look at, but it doesn't tell anything of why changes occur. Changes occur because what happens on other pages that we will get into shortly. Any questions so far, Aim?
Nothing coming through.
Okay. I may probably put some of them to sleep already, who knows? Okay, let me back up here a little bit. On page 2, okay, of this report, and this is the same as every page, there's about 23 pages that you're going to find in the whole SFPR for your district. This is a number of students in every special ed category. And this is also going to show you the scholarship losses. I'll get this right one of these days. Okay, now if you'll look with me on these, and I'll read them for you if you have any trouble reading them. But if you see the ones that are marked B and B1, B2, B3, B6, those are a different category of special ed. This is the number of students who are in there. Now, in the first one up there is category 1. Now, category 1, okay, if you're category 1, this pays a certain amount. And I'll go through with you later, because we had questions not long ago on how much every one of these categories generate. And later on, I will show you how much each of these do. Now, as you go through these categories, you're going to find that they actually go one direction. There's more money involved the higher the category of special ed, the higher their handicap is. Now, right below that, and I didn't mark this, but for career tech, it's just the opposite. Instead of going from the lowest to the highest, we'll find that this one actually changes and goes from highest to lowest. And you can see the number of students in the different special ed categories that you have. A little bit further down, okay, you can see I marked a couple lines there. Those are your autism scholarship students and also your Peterson scholarship students. So this district has 9 students who are going somewhere else for autism handicap or for the Peterson handicap. And you know, if you remember back on that other page, the total amount of money, which we'll see again later, averages about $17,000 for those 2 handicapping conditions. So your district is going to lose this district's going to lose $17,000 on average for those kids that are either Peterson scholarship or autism scholarship. You can lose as much as $27,000. And I said that, $27,000 per pupil in either one of those categories. That non-pub, usually parochial or Christian school, has to prove how much they're spending in order to receive that amount of money. Further down, I didn't mark it. This district has about 56% free and reduced lunch. This is a pretty high district as far as their economic disadvantagement. And that's marked down there under the very bottom, and you can find it on yours. Okay, you can find that percentage down here under E11 if you're following along on your own. The state share index, which I'm going to show you, and this is something you need to know and you should be looking for. This doesn't change very often. It changes about once a year. But the state share index, which I've marked here for this particular district, is 0.687765410. So they get their money, 68% of their money, they get from the state of Ohio. So you can figure if that's the amount of money they get from state, the opposite of that would be around 32%. So 32% of this district's money is raised by property taxes. 68% of them is raised from this document you have in front of you right now. Now, I've seen districts as low as 5% this year, 5% from the state and 95% from local. Now, let's stop here for just a second and I'll give you a situation. You can see if a student leaves this district, they take at least $6,020 with them. That money comes from either the state share or the local property taxes. If you're a district that's only getting 5% from the state, they're going to be taking 95% of that money from your local tax dollars. But they're still going to take the same amount of money. So every student you lose, roughly $6,020, goes at least to that district. Every student you gain from open enrollment, you gain $6,020 this year. Now, some people have asked me this question, and I'll share it with you. Supposing I have a student who is open enrollment and all of a sudden gets in trouble and the courts place that student in a center somewhere else, and they say, who's going to pay for it? If you've accepted him as an open enrollment student, you're going to pay for it. If that other district accepts him as an open enrollment student from your district, they're going to pay for it, wherever that student is. And you cannot, I repeat, because the question was asked to me, can we just disenroll them? Can we just send them back to their regular district? You can try, but that other district's not going to take them. If you've said, I'm going to have this student for open enrollment this year, your superintendent signed that, you're going to have them. And in the past, I've been very careful on who I let in because I know that sometimes you might get $6,000 for an open enrollment student, but you may pay an agency $25,000 to educate that student that year. So does open enrollment actually give you a bonus all the time? Absolutely not. Sometimes it's good for you, sometimes it's bad. Now you can see that 68%, whatever you are in your district, is going to be what comes from the state. Whatever else, it makes up 100%, is going to be actually your property taxes. Trailer taxes, house taxes, business taxes, any kind of taxes that are figured. And you see here, it doesn't just go out to 68%, but they take it out a long, long way in that decimal. Now, I'm going to go on to this page, and then after this one, I'll stop again with you. These are going to be on the next few pages. I'm going to show you the Peterson Scholarship counts. I'm going to show you where you can find your community counts that are taken from you, your autism school counts, calculation factors, and this is one that many people overlook. It's kind of our trends, and this is very important that you look at these, because you can see the trends and you can say to your superintendent or treasurer, look, we're pretty much even throughout every year in the past 5 or 6 years. And probably, unless you have a superintendent who likes to look at numbers or a treasurer who really likes to drill down, you might actually know something they might not be aware of, but you can tell them about. And then we're going to look at the total loss to the district of scholarship money. So before we go on, Amy, do we have any more questions?
No, we don't.
Okay, we'll give you some time after that. Okay, now looking at this page, okay, up at the top, you're going to find these are schools that have taken students, okay, from you, and it all the way down on this page. And I think there's some on the page I didn't include here. There are 6 students here who are Peterson Scholarship students. They tell you what age they are, they tell you what handicapping condition they are, and they tell you how much they may be taking. For instance, again, it goes from category 1, or they call SEC 1, all the way to SEC 6. Those are the categories. So you can see on this particular example from these schools, they took 6 students are going by the way of Peterson. Now, one of the things you may not know is you cannot educate in a parochial school or a Christian school by an IEP. They have a service plan. So if they are actually going to get served on an IEP, the district is going to be a public school serving them. However, this came along and it became kind of used quite a bit lately with Peterson scholarships and autism scholarships, because the parochial school can now, if they qualify and apply for the Peterson, they can actually get up to $27,000 for those kids in certain handicap conditions for every year. Now, it makes fiscal sense for those schools, and I can't blame the parochial schools or the Christian schools, because they're not paying the salaries that the public schools are. And so therefore they can provide a lot more services in a way to those students, because the cost is not that high to provide those services. In a public school with the salaries what they are, you would be paying more for those people to provide the services. So when they go to here, they can advertise, and they do, that they can provide so many more services for these particular kids. And you can see that goes on, here with the Peterson and also the autism scholarship, which I'll show you in a little bit. Also on this page are the community school students. These are the kids online, not necessarily in brick and mortar schools, but basically in what we call the charter schools. And you can see here, again, they're drawing that money of 6,000 and some dollars, but they're also drawing weighted funding with the different handicapping conditions that they have to serve. So therefore, if they're in a higher category, they're going to draw more money. In a lower category, they're going to still draw more money. Then they're going to actually receive more than just that $6,020 for the year, fiscal year 21. And there's some examples there. Now going to the next page. Okay, you can see the total amount of community schools students, okay, would be out of the total they have. They're going to have some students who have disabilities. And you can see here how much money is taken away along with the weighted funding, which was going to come about too. Then the autism scholarship, you can see here there are 3 students in this district, 1 in kindergarten, 2 from 1 through 12. And so a total of 3 students, okay, for the autism scholarship. And again, that's money that's being taken and deducted all along. Now they're deducting them. And if this changes, if a student changes here on these pages during the year, you're going to find that what happens will be those numbers will be adjusted. So if a new student comes in with a handicap, it goes up. If a student leaves the Peterson program, it may go down. Okay, if they come during a year from another district and have the Peterson, and they move into your district and they're added on, your numbers will go up for your deducts. And if they leave, they'll go down. So this is below that line I told you about on that first page. And it's going to change as we go through here. Now, as we go a little further, I'm going to show you on here. This is what I find to be very interesting. If you notice here the calculation factors of all the students for this district in fiscal year 16, they had 844.46 students, counting everybody that's involved. The next year they went to 849, so they gained a little bit. The next year, the third one with my arrow pointing, 846, so they dropped about 3. And then in fiscal year 19, they dropped to 810. Now, if I were the EMIS coordinator in this district, I'd only be very worried on why there's a significant drop from 18 to 19. I'd be looking to see in my district, here during that year, okay, it's a little late now, and you can't do a thing about this now, but I'd be concerned why such a drop in this district. But overall, and you can see a little bit down below there where my other line is going out, the horizontal line, they actually lost about 0.1339 students, okay, during that time, during that 4-year period. About 1% they lost. So they lost about 1.3%. And, that makes a difference. 1% of your students, okay, if you look at it, is going to be about 8 students in this case. So they've lost an average, if you base it on this, of about 8 students every year. Or the biggest loss, believe it or not, came within the last 2 years, from the year 18 to 19. And somebody in your district, if it's not you, I think would find that very interesting. And it'd be kind of interesting to know why that loss actually occurred. Moving on. You can see on this page, okay, VE services up at the top have to do with services that are taken, okay, by the Career Center when they test some of your kids as to whether they're coming in to the JVS during the 11th and 12th year. Also, the next one underneath there is BDD. That would be your Board of Developmental Disadvantagement. That would be your Bright Promises. Any of those schools, Robert Bycroft, could be even down in, Belmont County has one. That's the students that you're losing their money to because they're going there. Now, this is the next one I find very interesting. For the Peterson and the autism, this district loses $155,000. And there are 9 students. And if you divide 9 into that, you're going to come out with about $17,000 that your district is losing if you were this district for those Peterson kids and the autism students. Now, you know what to do with them when they leave you, and you know how to withdraw those kids because there's situation codes that you use to lose those students, but they can figure out, those schools that are taking those kids, the parochial and the Christian schools have to calculate for the state how much it's costing for those students to be educated. And again, they're educating with bodies of people, teachers, aides, speech therapists, psychologists, and so forth, at a lower amount of money than what you are in the public schools for aides and paying for benefits and so forth. So they can provide more. I'm not going to say the quality or quantity is the same. That's something to be determined. But you can see what they have the same amount of money as a public school has and can spend it less on each person who's employed. They can make a profit and or at least provide better services by quantity. And this is why it's very appealing to some of these schools to take your students under the Peterson or the autism scholarship. Now, the next page, and then I'll stop here and ask if there's any questions. This is how preschool special ed is funded. And as I mentioned before, my friend, Mrs. Britton and I spent some time on this. And this is what I want to show you. And this is why it may be a little different. Now, let's look up here at the categories. A, B, you can see A, B, C, D, E, and F, the 6 categories of special ed. Now, if anybody wants to know what category 1 generates, you can see it generates about $1,578. You can see, coming over there. You can see $4,000 basically for 2, $9,000 for 3, $12,000 for 4, $17,000 for 5, and $25,637 if a public school has category 6. Now remember, I told you that for the Peterson and the autism scholarship, they can get $27,000. So those non-pubs can get more money for a autism student or a category 6 student than what you can as a public school. Now, in the next column, it's 0.5 because they're half-day students here that are being funded in preschool handicap. I don't care if they stay all day, they're still funded here as 0.5. And then beside it is that number I showed you a long time ago. And this is the actual state share, that 0.6877654100. And then they, again, notice what they're doing. They're looking now at the number of students in each category. And then beside there, if you notice, is 0.99470165660. So they're not even giving you 100%. They're paying you on the year 2019. So they're reducing everybody a little bit, basically about 0.5%, in what they're going to give you. And you can see that's going to change from year to year, can be. And if you multiply and add as you go across there, you're going to see it gives that district that same 52,000 and some dollars that we had at the very beginning. And that was on that first page, page 1. Okay, and I'm going to quit right there, and I'm going to ask my friend Amy. Amy, we got any questions?
No, we don't.
Boy, these people, I must have put them to sleep, I can tell you. Now, I'm going to show you a booklet that you can print. Back there on that page, you can print a nice little booklet called FY21, School Finance Payment Report, line by line explanation. It's only about 12 to 15 pages long, and I'm going to show you where you can find some of the things I've talked to you about. So by the time we're done after today, you will be experts on the SFPR. I would bet you some of you could probably do a better job than I could in presenting this, and some of you could probably do a better job than your superintendent and treasurer on understanding why the changes occur. I know they're busy people, but I know that, when they ask you, they want to know why you have more money. They want to know why you have less money on this payment than what you had in the past. And this is going to try to help you today. The booklet is in color. You can print it. I couldn't here, but it looks like this. And you can print it back here. And here's the first page I'm going to talk to you about. Down at the very bottom of this is where they figure the preschool disability students. And I know you can't read this, but it's right down at the very bottom of this page. Shows you exactly how to figure this up. And this is how you can do it. This is it tells you how to find preschool special ed. They give every student $4,000, plus they put this weighted amount in here. And this is what you're going to be receiving for your special needs preschool. Now, some of you put regular typicals in your special ed preschool. Sometimes you put those special ed kids that have an IEP in regular developing preschool classes, but you're only going to get money from the state for the preschool students who have a IEP, who are considered to be and have been handicapped. Now, on the next page is going to give you the amounts and categories on this. For instance, which ones are category 1 all the way to category 6. This was on that same page. Again, $1,578, and all the way down to category 6 was $25,637. Now, I've had people call, and Chris and I've taken calls, I know, on how much money does a special ed student generate in different categories. And this is where we went to find that answer for them. Not necessarily the EMIS manual because it's changing, but actually here in this particular document, that all of you can print off, and I would certainly print them off. Now, above there, and you can't see it very well, but it tells you how you get your special ed transportation. And there's 2 ways of getting this money for special ed kids that are brought to school and taken home in a different manner than the rest of your students. And that tells you there on that page. Then if you go on to the next page, this is going to tell you about the Peterson Scholarship. And that's right on the number 2. The Cleveland Scholarship, which nobody has here, is 3. The Ed Choice up there would be 1, and some of you are starting to get a little bit of that Ed Choice, not all, but some. And then number 4, the Autism Scholarship. And I included another page here, And basically under disclosure items there, it's hard to read, I'm sure, but you can read on the other page that I sent you. This is the total the district received in fiscal year 19, okay, for special ed additional funding. And that's where, you get that, and you can see how they get that money. You can see how they get it on P, which is the career tech, and Q, which is also the economic disadvantagement. Now remember, EMIS is not a static figuring. It's going to change. And so does the SFPR. It changes, the formula every year or every 2 years, usually under the last 20, 30, 40 years. It's kept changing here during that time. And I think the biggest problem people have is they don't print out all the pages. Now, why is this so important to know? Well, I kind of try to summarize it for you. How your district's going to use this data that we just talked about today, they're going to look at these December federal child count dollars. Those would be the ones you do in December, and you're getting it from the federal government. And in this respect, you're getting money here for every student who is your resident in December. Now, remember what I just said. You're getting your resident special ed money. Now, in all your districts, you hear about excess costs. And that's when you bill another district for special ed costs over and above. Because remember, in December, you're getting money for your residents. And if your resident's being educated in another district, they're using that money. And so they're going to bill you for excess costs once a year. And that excess cost is going to be taken away from you because you got it in December. You're going to lose it later on. And if districts can justify higher amounts, they can get more money through excess costs. I've been in districts where the treasurer never billed for excess costs. And I know that I've had a friend of mine, and Mr. Beatty will be the first to tell you, and Jeannie, I know you're on here, but Mr. Beatty and I were great friends in Edison when I was the superintendent in my different districts. And I actually took money from him for not only for open enrollment, but for excess costs. And he sometimes said that he would be very happy when I retired or died, because at that point, we might not be taking that money away from him as much. Now, I would hope those districts I was in would still be taking that money if necessary, because you should not be educating a student who is your resident. You should be, but you should not be paying the excess costs for educating their special ed needs. And if you are actually taking them, you should also get that money. The district also uses it for civil rights reporting. And incidentally, Mr. Beatty and I are good friends, so he didn't really mean my death, okay, my demise, but he did mean my retirement might help him a little bit. The next thing, being accountable each year for spending your special ed funds. Some will find that, you need to be able to spend them. You need to show, your special ed coordinator needs to show how you're spending your money. And, again, if you get more and you're not spending it, there's a rule is that you're going to be actually giving back that money to the government. And no district wants to give back unless they very much have to. So this is almost 10 o'clock. We're all finished. And, I will take you to one more slide. And here's my name. I can be reached here. I usually only work in the mornings because as I get older, I have to take my nap in the afternoon sometimes. So, again, this is why I'm doing this morning, so I can keep awake. And believe it or not, people, I'll be listening and answering questions this afternoon. I made sure I could stay up today, and I'll probably say to Bernie tomorrow, Bernie, I don't know if I can make it tomorrow after, putting this whole day in, but I'll be here tomorrow morning, so don't worry. If you need to get a hold of me, that's my extension. If you need my email, the P's in there. Many of you heard my story. The reason I have a P in there, I more often than not have to visit the restroom as I get older, like we all do. And therefore the P's in there, but it really stands for Paul. And it's FREDP .Burns, okay, at OME-RESA.net. And thanks for allowing me to be part of this program today. And I hope you've learned something about the SFPR. I hope you can teach some other people in your district about the SFPR. And if you have any questions about it after we're done, feel free to call me, contact me, and I will call up an SFPR in your district and I will look at it and I'll review it with you. So that's one of the things I like to do still in my ripe old age. And at this point, we're done. And I believe, Emily, back to you. We have a break, don't we? All the way to 10:15. So you can take care of your needs and get some water, some coffee, go to the restroom, say, oh my God, I had to listen to that guy. I have to listen to him again. Just get yourself prepared because we got another round coming. So thank you for the morning, and we'll look forward to seeing you in 15 minutes again.
Thanks, Fred.
You're
Okay,
welcome.
everybody, if you want to take a 15-minute break, we'll get started with Fred's next session.
Okay, Mrs. MC Bickerstaff, I'm ready to go whenever you are, and we'll give them a couple more minutes if that's okay.
Yep, we'll wait till right around 10:15 and we can get started, Fred.
Okay.
Okay, Fred, if you're ready to go, you can go ahead and get started.
Okay. I hope everybody can hear me. I hope you've had a chance to get a break. Let me tell you a little story. You know, I'm a class of 67, and we have a reunion meeting once a month in Toronto from our high school class, and we sit around and tell jokes and tell stories when we were young in high school. And sometimes we tell the same story every month. Now, if I tell you any of the same jokes this time as I did during the previous presentation, just laugh, okay, and make an old man happy. But, you know, don't worry about it, you know, because, you know, sometimes I forget and I tell the same story. So I don't want to do that. So I'll try to tell you a few different funny ones as we go through here. And if any of you are interested, if you're going to be at OAEP next week, I'm doing that basic presentation I just did at 3 something. So please don't listen to it again. You can start your Monday off, you know, by getting out of there at least the last 45 minutes early, and you can save yourself some traffic going home. But, you know, it's the same thing. But if you have somebody in your district who would like to learn about it, you might, and if you're registered for OEAEP, you might let them get on and listen to the torture of hearing that same thing all over again. But this time I'm going to talk to you about staff's importance. And I'll tell you what, we really work hard on this staff thing. And I'll tell you what, I am so pleased, you can't believe that we have developed a real friendship with our own fiscal office here. And I'm going to suggest that every one of you do the same thing. Our fiscal office here at OME-RESA basically was completely separated from the students. And, you know, even yesterday, when we were in open lab, we had people say, hey, when are we going on the redesign? And, you know, all we had to do was ask, and we got the names and, you know, the dates when they're going on, the other districts that haven't gone to the redesign. And, you know, we share that kind of information. And that's something I'm going to say to you now. Please share information with other people in your district. One of the people you're going to see, I see a number 3 there, the HR person in the district, or the one inputting and maintaining staff in your district. You need to become their good friend, because if you two can work together, you're going to save yourself a lot of problems. Those HR people, they don't know what you need for EMIS any more than you know what they need to make payroll. But if you can kind of work together, you can solve a whole lot of problems. My work has taught me here to correct information prior to moving from classic to redesign. If you can do this, you will save yourself tremendous problems. Many of you in your district have staff, I hate to say, who have gone either to the happy hunting ground in the sky, or they've left your district and gone to another state, and you've still been reporting in your district staff that is still gone for a long time. We have found in helping districts that some districts have still been reporting people 15 years after they've never been there. And I say that in honesty. Some of your districts who I've worked with, and I've worked with about 12 of them now, and there's a goal in my mind that I would like to work with every single district, the 50 some we have, in correcting their staff before I actually leave my position. Now that's my goal, and as long as I still have something to do, I know I still got a job here, and Bernie won't send me home. So as long as Bernie won't send me home, I guess I can stay and help. And this is something, I offer to every district, and I offer it again today. I will help you clean up your staff, basically in the fiscal area, so that you don't have to keep fixing the same mistakes year after year. Now, when you move over to fiscal, and I've already checked with fiscal, so they aren't going to get mad when I say this, you're still going to have a few little niches that you have to fix. We did some yesterday with one district, and it didn't take very long to fix them. So, the transition from classic to redesign is so much easier and so many fewer problems if you're going to get it done and get your staff corrected before you move over. One of the things redesign does is they sometimes want an asterisk for something that has nothing to do with that teacher, but they need an asterisk, and you may not have one in that position. They're going to do other things in here too, like they won't, even though you have all the screens marked, they won't actually count that person unless they have a pay screen, unless you're actually paying them. So it reduces the number of staff members that you may have because you haven't paid those people yet this year. But as soon as you pay them, and as soon as they set up a contract screen in there, they will actually go through and increase again. But because of COVID, many of those supplementals haven't been paid last year or even this year, but they're still on there. And if they're paid hopefully next year, they're going to be okay. So, we'll go through this today, and, we'll stop every once in a while and ask questions here. I worked with an HR person in a large district, okay, and she became a real good friend of mine. She developed a guide from what we did together, and she told me that, hey, I've got these, and some of these weren't even mine. They were sins of the past before she ever did them, but we corrected them. And she gave me this informational sheet and told me to share with anyone I ever work with in the future. And I've revised this a little bit. And as you go through this is what I'm going to tell you has really been a big help, I think. Her name was Marty Prince. Her name, I made her put it on there. She didn't charge me, and I didn't charge her. But we did charge that district because Groveport Madison is not one of our locals. Angie's been gracious to give this service free to anybody of our locals. And so there's about 40 more I have that I hope to, keep on doing these with. But this was a little cheat sheet she used in order to kind of guide her in the HR department. And they actually had 465 employees, teacher employees. Plus they had about 250 classified employees for a total of 700 staff members. Now, if we can do it successfully with 700 staff members, nobody in the land of OME-RESA has that many to worry about. So these are different things that were on there and different things you can read. And I'm not going to read it with you here, but you can see one of the things down there, special ed FTE, This is one of the things neglected. This shows the state by putting it in here, if you're paying for preschool teachers who are special ed, or aides that are special ed, or anything like that, okay, or even special ed teachers in grades 1 through 12, you can put that in. It's a special line, and it says special ed FTE. It has nothing to do with their other FTE, but it says how much of the time they spend, whatever hours they work, with special ed students. The next part of that sheet she gave me, extended days. If you don't know this, there are no such thing as extended days anymore except for ESCs. So what happened is we made them supplementals for that year. And then this year and years from now, she's actually putting them in as one screen. Instead of 185 days and they have 20 extended, she'd put them in as 205 and put all their salary in one job. The assignment areas. This is a whole list of the assignment areas. If anybody's on here, you know, they need an assignment code. And I'll bet some of you in your districts do not put assignment codes in for cafeteria, custodial, and transportation, gifted. And some of these that are here, you may use some of them, but I'll bet you aren't using all of them unless we've gone over this, because I've taken these all from the EMIS manual, and this is all up-to-date information for when they're entering their staff. And that's why our girl Marty, you know, was so happy to get this, because she actually produced this paper from what we had done with her 600 and some students. Staff members, rather. Up at the top here, okay, is also, if you're going to have positions as supplementals, and Lori Potrajak was the one that kind of tipped me off on this, and believe it or not, I'll give Lori credit if she's listening. This has to do with position codes and supplementals. If you have administrators, they probably ought to have a 199 supplemental. If you're a teacher, 299 supplemental. If you are a cook doing a supplemental, it's probably going to be a 999. The 99s are what you use as supplementals. I was telling everybody to use 899s for all of them. That will not matter if you did it. It won't hurt. But if you want it to be correct, you know, probably 199s and 299s are what the state's looking for. Do not report, okay, all staff, okay, here, and this is what, do not report any subs to EMIS. She wrote down this, okay, now if you have a sub who's taking a teacher's place, who's actually filling in for this time, yes, you would. But, you know, too many people put in sub-custodians, sub-drivers, sub-teachers. Those do not need to be reported. Total years and authorized years, okay, for experience. Basically, these are teaching years. They're teachers. Now, if I was a teacher, and I was for 13 years, and I got to enjoy my sixth graders, and sometimes I wonder why I didn't just stay there. But my 13 years would be total years of teaching, and my authorized would have been 13. Now, when I became a principal and other things, you know, those do not change. You know, they are just what you have as a teacher. Now, your authorized and your total might be the same. And the reason is, you know, you've spent all your time teaching, but they might not be the same. Supposing I taught in a college for 4 years at Eastern Gateway, and then I became a teacher for 10 years. I would have 10 years authorized, and I'd have 14 years total, because those other years would be on there from a previous job I had. Okay, authorized would be what you have. Now, authorized can be in 2 districts. If I'm in one district for 5 and go to another district and do 5 more, then I'd have a total authorized of 10. So that's how that works. Funding levels and funding sources, you know, those have to do with letters, and those in payroll oftentimes see letters like G, F for, you know, G for title, F for, you know, federal funding, L for local, and then the percentage of time, which we'll go through here in the next few slides. Supplemental contracts. Okay, again, they're added as staff. If you have, you do not want to make 2 of them for a teacher. You do not want to have a teacher. Now let's take another example. Let's take a person who's been a cook and have a job 1. You do not want, and they do not want to change job 1 to becoming a secretary necessary. You want to close out job 1 and open job 2, if that's their regular job. If you have a supplemental that they do, maybe that secretary takes care of the yearbook funds. You don't want to give her a 502 as a secretary. You want to give her a 599 as a supplemental for the extra money that she gets for that supplemental. Now, if they deal with kids, the 800s have 801s and 802s, and that's because those actually deal with students. I'm using an example of a 199 for an administrator who might be on an LPDC committee. They're not actually working with kids. I'm using a 299 because they might be a lead teacher and get a stipend or supplemental. So that's what you would use for them. End of the year down below there for processes. It's very important that you follow through with what the fiscal office here has a meeting, and your fiscal should be changing and updating the year's experience. They can do it massively for teachers, and they can also, enter inactive status, okay, for current year because of resignations. And in keeping track of that, we'll go through that, how important that is later on, and when you should quit reporting those to the state. The next one I say is working as a team. And this is so important, people. Working as a team. And I said before, make people responsible for data. Don't you take on all the responsibility. Don't take the blame when things are wrong on a report card, having to do with staff. Don't take the blame whenever they're not updated and revised. And it's important that you update at the end of the year, as we talked about in here. This is a form that, Chris and one other young lady in one of our neighboring districts, she doesn't work here anymore, but they developed, and this was one, we put a copy of it in. You can take it, change it, do whatever you want to, but what it does is it shares responsibility. Starts out when you're interviewing and the superintendent's interviewing at the top. He fills in the first part up there, down through placement on a salary schedule. He tells them how many years he's going to give them. Incidentally, if you don't know this, by Ohio law, the most a superintendent can give an employee coming to your district is 10. I know sometimes they give you 14, they give you 15, they give you 20 because they need them and they were willing to pay more. But again, by doing this and having them put their name on it, means that you don't have to be the one that says, if an auditor comes, why did you give them 15 years on a salary schedule? You can say, I didn't. This person was given 15 years by somebody other than me. The second part has to do with developing a contract. That would be where the treasurer would take care of it. The treasurer is going to sign off down there below on how it's being developed, along with the treasurer and the superintendent, and they would do that part. The next page comes with a little different. This has to do with the payroll, whether they're an STRS or SCRS, and what they're doing with how they're being paid, how often they're being paid, when they're starting to be paid, and so forth. There's a place for that treasurer or the HR person to sign off. And finally, this paper should come to you, the EMIS coordinator, if you're on here, and you will be actually putting down what you're putting into EMIS based on the information of all the other people. And then I would take this paper and put this paper right in their permanent record file. So when the auditor asks for it, it's not you who's doing all of this, but it's only the person who is involved with actually doing it for each one. Now I'll stop there and ask our MC if there's any questions so far in the chat.
Hey, Fred,
I'm sorry, Amy. Yes.
do you have access to admit? Lisa Britton is trying to get back in, and since I gave you the host, I can't admit anyone
You
into the
can't
meeting.
admit anybody. How did I do that?
If you click on participants, it's down. It should be down at the bottom if you hover.
Okay, I don't have it. I can't see it down here.
Hold on. Let me take host back, and then I'll give it
You
right.
take it back.
All right, give me a minute. Participants. All right, reclaim. Admit all. All right, let me give you back host. If I can find it. There it is. Okay, you should be host again.
Okay, I'm hosting. Okay, Lisa, glad you're back on with us, okay? You can suffer through this like we are. Okay, now, anybody have any questions so far, Amy?
I think that was it. I think we're good.
Okay. What errors in your staff can cause? This is the effect on the state report card. Errors on staff will invalidate your student data. Staff errors can skew your pupil-teacher ratios. Staff errors have an effect on financial data being reported. Now, we're going to look at different things today. And we're going to show you some examples here of position codes and how important those are. Funding sources. Incorrect years of experience. Authorized total, and a couple years ago they added this other one, principal. As I said before, the years a person has been a teacher has nothing to do with those principal years. Once a person becomes that principal, unless they ever go back to being a teacher, those total years and authorized years do not change. Degrees, whether you're a bachelor's, master's, doctorate, the hours you have, how you're funded. We'll show you examples of that today. Incorrect FTEs, I'm going to talk about and drill you today because I'll tell you, that is so important. So very important. We're going to talk about when a staff member leaves during the year. And we're going to talk about when a staff member changes position in mid-year. Now, this is from what's called a POSSUM report. And I'm going to just show you, you can see there yourself, in this particular district, okay, this is a main office. And this is the people who are assigned basically to that main office because of the IRN number of being a district IRN. Now, if you notice there, the first one's a 104, an assistant principal. Now, most likely, I've circled it because there was a problem in that district when I helped him. They assigned a principal to a central office. Now, the reason was that person was a principal, then became an assistant, in a main office, but they never changed the code of a 104 or the IRN number. So, you can see what causes that problem. They also assigned 3 teachers to the main office. Now, that could be if they were being shared, like music teachers. That's a possibility. But if you look down there at the 802, they have 15 coaches in that main office. Now, I don't know what they're coaching, but, I tell you what, most main offices, don't go out and, have coaches that help with sports. They should have assigned these people to a building they were in with their IRN number. And with extracurricular, they had 899. They had 21 extracurricular people. And those were 899, such as teachers maybe who were doing National Honor Society, things like that. And again, that wouldn't happen. Down below there, you see some 502s. They had 502s. They had 19 of them in the central office. I don't believe they did, because these were people who were in different buildings, and they should have been assigned to the buildings they were in. They had teaching aides in the central office. Well, I don't think that happened either, because those teaching aides should have been whatever school they were actually assigned in. Now, if they were assigned to 2 schools as an aide, I can understand why they might have put them to the central office. Coaching assignments down below, extracurricular, they even had a custodian there. And even the next to last one, they had a cook in that central office. Now, I tell you what, I don't think that happened. And then when we got through, with this district, we moved this all around and changed this drastically and assigning them to where they should be. Now, one of the ones I want to mention to you today has to do with those aides of being 505s. Now, write this down somewhere you can. If you use an aide of a 505, that is like an aide who grades papers, maybe is a special ed aide, things like that. They do not have to be highly qualified. If you use the other aide, which is a 415, 505s on this one, they don't show 415s. But if you are a school-wide Title I building, in the manual, and I'll show you where, you must report those people as 415s, and you show them with a highly qualified paraprofessional mark of yes, they're highly qualified paraprofessional, and they are 415, and you use a Title I assignment code. Even if they're not funded Title I, you can still pay them locally if you run out of money for title, but they still should be marked with the assignment code, which I'll show you, 415, and also with the mark of being a parapro. Moving on to the next page on this example. This was an elementary building. If you notice in this elementary building up there, they had a 104, and they actually had a assistant principal, but they didn't have a principal. So guess where that principal should have been from the other page? Should have been here, because most schools don't have an assistant principal when they don't have a regular principal. Again, I just marked a couple other ones here. They have some 212s here. 212s are special ed teachers who do not give grades. A 230 is a special ed teacher who does give grades. That's something to remember that. That's back on that sheet that I showed you earlier on the 212s and the 230s. We also cleaned up in this district the 505 aides down there in that building, because this was a school-wide building and needed to have that in there. Now, we also ran a report card for this district that year when we did it. And if you look here, this is one on a state report card that'll show you how many you should have. Now, if you look up here on school counselors, they should have basically 2.3 per 1,000 is state average. In this district, they had 2.2 per 1,000. Pretty good, isn't it? Pretty much the same. But they had 13 school counselors. So you can figure if you took 2 times 6, that tells you how many students were in that district. 6,000 students were in that district. And again, that's why they had the 13. Now, all of these pretty much go the same. You can look down here at general ed teachers, all of them going down. But if you look here, when I circled teacher aides, the state average is 7.2 down there per 1,000. They had 16.9 per 1,000. And they actually employed 100 aides in that district. Now, when we got finished, they didn't have this many. Okay, and in fact, we had numbered them down quite a bit. If you look at their phys ed teachers, look at art, fine arts, music, and phys ed towards the bottom. The first two, they had 15 fine arts, 14.6 music, but they only had 5 phys ed health teachers. And again, they had not marked these people for phys ed and health correctly with the assignment codes that were necessary. And you can see that if you have 15 fine arts and you have 15 that are in music, or 14, you should figure you're probably going to have the same amount of people in phys ed, if not more. And in this district, they were not coded correctly. So that's one of the things we worked on with them. The next one was a report here. It showed their attendance rate at the top for the staff. This district made an average of 95 or 59,000 for their teachers. And they had 9 years of average experience. Now, 9 years average experience, and most of you are probably going to have bigger numbers than that. That means that they have a pretty big turnover and a lot of young teachers coming. And so, that's one of the things you kind of notice here when they have so few years of, actual experience. And that's something to look at. They had lead teachers or, senior teachers, who've been qualified that way. You saw down below, they had 99.7 of their teachers, okay, that, had a bachelor's degree. 47 of them had a master's degree. 18% of them were inexperienced, meaning new teachers. That's a big turnover every year. You figure, 18% kind of goes along with that one up there on their average number of years because they're turning them over pretty quickly. Percentage of teachers not teaching in a field of certification, 0.2. That's probably pretty normal. They might have had a sub who wasn't licensed, finishing out a year for somebody maybe who was on sick leave or something like that. The next one we found interesting, your district principals. How many of them had a bachelor's degree? 100%. And then how many of them had a master's degree? Only 92%. Well, you know what happens? You can't have a certification for being a principal unless you have a master's degree. What we found here was there was a teacher in that district who had been a teacher. And when they became a principal and they changed their screen to making them a principal, the one thing they never looked at, and you might not think of, is what kind of a degree did that person have? Well, they could never have become that principal unless they'd attained a master's degree. And so many times, people don't look at those screens in the HR department and change them for like when they get a new degree, when they get a new license, or when they get a new license, years, how many years they have, or how many hours they have. Maybe credit hours, that's not changed either. So that was another one that was never updated. And if you don't think that happens, last year I called 7 districts in OME-RESA that had the same problem. Some of them had 3 principals that didn't have master's degrees, but they did. And all they had to do was go in and change on their stat screen that they were a master's degree person rather than just a bachelor's degree. Now I'll quit there for a little bit and I'll ask Miss Amy if she has any questions for me.
No, sir.
Okay. Let's look here now at L. This is directly out of the manual, 3.1, page 4. This is initial and final staff L. And Chris and I yesterday talked about that being open now. And the second L is open. It didn't used to be you could change, but now you can change some things between first L and second L. You can change your degree. You can change your hours. You can change, those kind of things which you used to not be able to. This tells you what needs to be reported, who needs to be reported with EMIS, and it also tells you at the bottom of that page who doesn't need reported as EMIS. Now, I've had districts that I've worked with that have put in people who were time clock workers for basketball. Now, just looking at those directions there, you would not want to put a person in who was a time clock person as far as EMIS, because that's a part-time job, okay? You don't want to put game officials in. I'll tell you one that's very interesting. I had a district, and I won't divulge which one, but they had 17 bus drivers. But in EMIS, they made a screen for their regular job as a bus driver, a screen for when they took field trips, called it regular, and another screen for when they took athletic events and called it regular. So in that district, they had 51 full-time bus drivers instead of 17. All we had to do was go in and made those other two supplementals that they got paid, okay, for that year. And the next year, we didn't even, I told them, don't even report those extra ones, because EMIS is only looking for that main job. They don't care if you're taking a field trip this month, not next month, or taking an athletic team doing basketball, but not football. These are not people you have to report. They're part-time positions that you have there. Going to the next page. ESP people up to grade 8. If they're 230 and up to grade 8, you put these assignment codes on it for art, if they're music, or if they're phys ed. Now, if they're beyond 8 in art, music, and phys ed, you do not. You count them as 230s, and you put no assignment down for them. They can be a regular teacher. You can put a regular teacher assignment in there for them, because they're actually teaching courses that are given credit. But up to grade 8. Now, what if you have a school that is, say 4 through 9? If they're teaching 9th grade, you probably should have a screen for them and divide their salary up, and divide the other ones from 4 to 8, for a salary, and then make their FTEs different, because if you want to get credit for it. The people who show up on your ESP are guidance counselors, libraries, registered nurses, social workers, and visiting teachers has basically kind of gone away. But you do have a few cases where, particularly this pandemic, where you could actually see a person assigned as a visiting teacher. So that could count for your ESP, okay, at that particular time. Now, a counselor can count all the way up through grade 12. A social worker can count all the way up to grade 12. But I'm talking about the other ones, the art, music, and phys ed. This is on their ESP screens. Now, up at the top there, you can see a 230, a general ed teacher, preschool, and also the assignment code for a general education teacher of K to 12. You see a special ed assignment code, 9999414. If it's a gifted teacher, 999-380, and a preschool special ed. Excuse me, I think I said special ed before, but I didn't mean it. This would be the 999-412. CTE for career pathways, assignment code here. And again, the same for 230s for art, music, and phys ed up from K to 8. That's taken right out of the manual there. And you can see it's 3.4. It's page 5 at the top. And let's look at the 18 down below there. I'm going to read this with you and make sure. And those districts I've worked with, you know, they've been easy to correct, but it's sometimes you want to say, why am I doing this? Well, here's why you're doing this. I'm going to read example 2 down there to you. A full-time teacher who instructs for 6 hours a day has a 1.0 reported as 100. A teacher who instructs students for 3 hours a day in a district would have an FTE of 0.50. What you do for all of these jobs is you take the person with that particular code for position. Whoever has the most is your 1.0, and any part thereof is a fractional or a decimal part of what they would be. Now, for most of your teachers, you probably don't have too many half-time teachers, but this would be what it would be. This could be a half-time teacher and a half-time principal. You'd show a screen for a position for the teacher and also for the principal, and report each of them as being 0.50 FTE. The second example, 8 cooks. 3 cooks work 3 hours a day, 2 work 4 hours a day, 3 work 5 hours a day. They define this as saying that 5 hours is equal to 1.0. So the 5-hour cook is the most at 5. So if somebody works 4, that's going to be a 0.80. If they work 3, it's a 0.60. If they work 2.5, it's a 0.50. Now that's their FTE. And I'll show you where that shows up. Now, what, you know, in this case, I told you about that one that had 17 bus drivers. They actually had 3 different screens for them, with each of them being full-time, and showed the 51 bus drivers. Qualified paraprofessional, I told you, was a 415. You use a 415 if it's a school-wide building. The 505 does not have to be, you know, this. But if you're a qualified paraprofessional, you're going to put a yes in there. And again, if you notice here under the next section, I typed in some things for you. This is not in your manual. It's not on that page. But don't worry about the 505s. But this is an aid. A qualified paraprofessional element is reported for all instructional paraprofessionals that work in a Title I school-wide building or who are funded by Title I funds in a Title I targeted assistance building. Now, if you're school-wide and somebody who takes care of title in your district will be the one to know that. That's going to be the person you're going to talk to and say, is that building school-wide? And I'm going to bet for the most part, all schools today are considered and have become school-wide. So what you do is you put down below there a 415, not the 505. You show an assignment code of 999140, which is a Title I code. You have a funding source of G. Let's say you don't have enough money to fund all those in title because title's cut back and you don't have enough money to fund them all. You can also use an L there. You still put the same in, but you use an L, meaning you locally funded those people. This is always going to be in a school-wide Title I building. And if somebody says, why do we have this? This is why you have it, because the EMIS manual says that. And you know the EMIS manual couldn't possibly tell you something that isn't 100% correct. Now, I've given you a list. If you want to look for assignment codes, that's where you can find them in the manual. Position codes, you can find them in the manual. Position funding sources in the manual. Special ed FTE in the manual. And this tells you where to look in case you have that. There's a line also for early childhood. As many of you may know or not know, okay, under early childhood education, you do not have to have a degree anymore. And I don't know if all of your EMIS coordinators or people listening to this know this, but anybody who's in preschool, regular ed preschool, you can have a 2-year associate's degree. And all of you who are in regular preschool, all the teachers and anybody like that can qualify in different ways to becoming a preschool regular teacher. Now, in doing so, they've also had to join SERS, which is what most of you probably are today who are listening to this, and I am now too, but they are not in STRS. Now, these people should never be crying because we pay in 10% as opposed to teachers paying in 15%. Will that change someday for SERS? Probably will, but our share is 10%. The teachers in STRS has been raised to 15%. It went 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 as it went on. Reviewing screenshots. What's always been in First L. Supplementals. Oh, here's one I need to share with you. Many districts I see put an A or an I for supplementals. If you hire a basketball coach, that is not a contracted service. He is being paid by you. He is your employee. He's regular. Many of them have put an A or I, and those are only for supplementals, such as, hiring somebody from the ESC, which could be an A, or you could hire a physical therapist with an I as an individual and pay them directly. But your supplementals are not going to be A's and I's. And I've seen that in 4 or 5 districts already. They are going to be regular employees if you're actually paying them. Changes you can make between the first L and second, right now while you're in it, you can change your degree from bachelor's to master's. You can change your FTE. Maybe they went from 100% down to 50, or maybe they went from 50 up to 75% and working more hours. You can change that. And you also can change their salary before the second L is over. This just happened last year, and up until then you couldn't, but you can now. Any questions so far again? Okay, let's look at these. Review the errors in Classic. The basic difference in Classic and redesign is they move things around, and you're going to see 3 screens instead of 2. You're going to have 3 screens that you have to mark reportable to EMIS. They're found in what's called the employment, which is like the biographical, the position, and their compensation screen. Reports and redesign. There are no POSSUM reports or no per det reports, and it's not near as easy. So Adam Lewis in my fiscal department here at OME-RESA, and I work a lot of times together, and he helps me and I help him, and we become friends. Remember I told you, be friends with your people in your fiscal office. Well, he's developed some reports that are similar, and they're called Fred reports because he and I invented them. I told him what I needed, And he was so kind to actually put them down. And if you ever want to contact him and you're in the redesign, he can share with you how to print these reports. Okay, and this is his email in here. And I'm going to show you a few classic errors that have become problems. And these are just examples I took from different districts. And they may be hard to see, but I'll tell you kind of what they are. The first one up there, marked A, has to do with the fact that this was a guidance counselor, had extended time, and was marked as 2 full-time FTEs. So they were showing 2 guidance counselors because he had a supplemental. So what we did on the second job there, in correcting it, we made it a supplemental. We made it, instead of a 202, we made it a 299. And we called it, instead of a regular one, we called it a supplemental. And we left 100% there. It didn't make any difference because supplementals don't count against that. And so therefore, we also saw it. One other error they put in this, they had a 999370 as an assignment code up there on the top one. And that was not wrong because that's the teacher's assignment code. And that guidance counselor wasn't performing a job as a counselor. Let's look at B. B was a special ed teacher. Everything was coded right with their assignment code. They had everything fixed up perfect, except by one line where it says the percent of time they spend with special ed, it should have been marked 1.00 because they were special ed. They were dealing all the time with special ed, and you could put it in. Now, supposing you have a title coordinator, special ed coordinator who do the same job, you have them listed as a coordinator, you keep everything the same, but on that one, it might be 50% they spend with special ed and 50% with title, which isn't special ed. And so they would have their time with special ed as being 0.50 in that one circle under B. The next one was an assistant principal. Boy, they thought this was pretty good. They showed the number of years they were assistant principal way over on the right under C, a top circle. But that teacher never taught, never had any years experience. I don't know many teachers who wouldn't have taught somewhere in their life 5 years. So if you wanted to be correct, you put 5 years in there under the one over to the left up at the top. And it might not be in that district, or it might be, but I'm sure a principal didn't become a principal without having been a teacher. And I know this person was a teacher because if you look at the one in the bottom, they had the assignment code there as being a teacher. So what they did was wipe out the teaching years because they became a principal. That is not necessary. But they should have wiped out the 999370 there on the bottom because that person was not any longer a teacher. Okay, let's look up here. G. G were a secretary on the top one, and the second one was a food service assignment. What they should have done is take one job and put a separation reason of 8 and a date, and then the next job they would have put in as being, you know, whatever the assignment code is and what day they began their second job, and they'd continue to report that person this year with a C up there where it has, you know, status, because they did get money for the first part of the year and money from the second part of the year combined. And then next year they could actually, after reporting at one time with a C on the first job and a 8 and a date, next year they could take that first one off and report as a U because they reported one time that person had that job there. Also, they put in an assignment code for both of those people with a 999370. So they were teachers, and neither one of those clerical, or food would have been a teacher. H, the one in the middle, was a Title I aide in a Title I school-wide building. They reported a 505. We had to make them a 415. Put the assignment code over there. It wasn't a teacher, it was a teacher's aide. So we put in a 415 over there on the right, and we also marked them as being highly qualified to meet the rules of EMIS and the manual, which you just saw. I put in here, this was a coach, and they made the coach a contracted personnel, which I said shouldn't have been. It should have been a regular employee, a C there, and they were a classified supplemental, which is fine, but they should have not called them contracted because they were paying themselves. And we're almost finished. I know I'm holding you up here, but I got a couple more minutes and a couple more slides. Contracted services, this is in manual 3.5. This tells you what you need to report. This is what a contractor reports, such as an ESC. This is what a resident district would report under the second little mark. If you're doing somebody who's non-EMIS, and by non-EMIS, I mean it could be a speech therapist, somebody Easter Seals may be doing your speech. Easter Seals would be a organization, so you use an A for that one, but an I could be for a speech therapist who you hire as a contract and pay them directly on a timesheet. And this is what you would do for contracted services. And finally, I bring you to the last page and your chance to have lunch and not listen to me anymore today. These are questions that you can have. You can reach me at the same location. I won't tell you the same joke again. Angie's offered free services to clean up your data. All you have to do is contact me and I will have your treasurer, or you will have your treasurer or superintendent send us an email to our fiscal office saying that Fred is allowed to look at our data and make changes. And I don't make any changes. I suggest changes. You're the ones that are going to make those changes. And you can decide not to make them if you don't want to. I don't care. But, I will tell you what I think needs to be changed, but I will never get in your data and make any changes. I need to be corrected on what I just said a couple seconds ago. And I'm most proud, finally, of our fiscal department, EMIS people working together, our fiscal, our student services. We're all one big family now. Instead of being one department, another department, we try to share. Yesterday, we shared with EMIS coordinators when you're going to be going to the redesign. And, before some people didn't even know. So now, you know when to, probably think about retiring, okay, before you go home again. We don't want you to retire. We can't fill your job if we did. So you know what? We don't want you to retire. We want you to stay. We want you to get old in this job. And we want you to have the best time in this whole wide world. Doing things like with EMIS and student and staff personnel. So this ends my time. I'm 5 minutes early. And so I'll tell you what. Any questions, Amy?
No, they're saying thank you.
Okay, so we'll sign off on this one. I don't know whether they're going to send out a thing later or not. I have no idea. You can tell me the truth. When I get old, the truth doesn't hurt me near as bad as when I was young. So if you said this guy was horrible, he's boring, I never want to listen to him again, you can go ahead and do that. They might even send me home. Who knows? Okay. And some days I might say that's a pretty good deal. My wife probably would say, though, she's probably happy I'm here because as long as I'm here and she's retired, she gets to do what she wants to when I'm not here. When I told her I'd be here all day today, you should have seen how happy she was. Now, she didn't tell me what she's going to do. She didn't tell me where she's going to be. But I do know this, if I called home, she's not there. So I tell you what, I thank you for this. I hope we've had a good time and enjoy your lunch. And what time are they coming back?
12 o'clock.
12 o'clock. Okay, so enjoy your lunch. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, Fred.
You're
So
welcome.
this concludes the morning portion. We'll start back at 12